Good morning. Today I want to talk about the issue of truth and adhering to it when dealing and speaking to other people, and as opposed to their feelings and their situations and their own lived experiences, and how you behave in practice when it's unkind or so forth. And This is there. I have a few videos coming up soon that'll be very critical. I'm not going to ask for money, no. But in a way, the fact I'm not kind of part of the problem. So let us begin. Um, and I'll bring up my talking points and try to. Um, Back in May of 1955, there was an incident, and I'll actually go back to the pictures. Um, when I was in sixth grade, there was an incident when I was walking on a Saturday afternoon in the spring after the Senators had actually won a game, which was on television, which was unusual, black and white then. And walking to this down 15th Street, about a block from this was Woodlawn Elementary School at the time, and I actually had second and sixth grade in those classrooms. And I saw a parked car with a taillight with blood on it. I was a little concerned. And the following Monday, I heard that a classmate who was a good friend of mine, had been injured with a bicycle collision with that car, and it was of great concern. But he was okay, and it turned out he would play in my little softball league in my backyard a few years later, and that kind of thing. So it was okay. It was an example of sometimes when it's right to be concerned about truthful information. But then there was another incident back in ninth grade in when I was when I was in Swanson Junior High, which is that, and there was a in algebra class there was a student in another section of that class with the same teacher who was an elderly woman, but she was very strict. Where he had an epileptic fit in class, very unusual, and she knew what to do. She stopped him from choking and everything. And he turned out to be okay. I don't know what became of him. But then there was a rumor. There was a rumor about the incident that was spread in the library, and I kind of participated in spreading the rumor. And then the next day, and I went to gym class, he was back, and he was back normally. And in front of the teacher, I can't believe I was 14 years old at the time with an immature teen brain, and I said, are you the one who had all those convulsions in algebra class? I literally said that the words came out of my mouth. I can still feel this. This is in June of 1958. And I caught hell for that kind of rudeness, even from the other students. And of course, it was true information, but of course, it was very rude to bring something like that up. The nurse actually called me in out of mixed chorus class later that day. It was actually about the talk in the library, not this. But this is the kind of thing that could put you in alternative education now. But of course, it was wrong to bring it up. But of course, it was bringing up something that was true, that was literally very true. And I suppose I was sort of insensitive in a way because uh, because of my own history of being sickly as a child. You know, one time I vomited in second grade, and with something happened in class that was just in front of other people, that was just a horrible, horrible thing. So in my teen brain, that was just an awful thing. And I was quite hypochondriac still, even in ninth grade, but I sort of started getting out of it when I was farther along in puberty, and I went to senior high school. That started getting better with puberty, and was just better resistance. And one reason I was sickly was probably because I had the measles in the end of first grade, which can wreck a child's immune system for 2 or 3 years afterwards. That could have been part of it. But today, I often face a situation where I'm asked not to talk. You know, when I've been at brunches in a local bar here, And sometimes somebody's gotten after me for bringing up the subject of the gender identity in front of other people, particularly in front of possibly trans people that are there. And this time, um, the facts are much more disturbing. In the other case, let me just say this about the ninth grade case: there was no way that incident was going to affect me. It just recalled my own anxiety about being sick in class, but in the past. But there was no way that could ever affect me, was unless I someday had to do CPR as a citizen, which I guess is something, is an issue. Everybody should learn how to do that. That's actually brings up another issue. But um, the gender issue, the way it's being debated, I keep on having to clear this phone, um, can have an effect on, women and women's spaces. It can have an effect on me, and it indirectly kind of reflects on gay men as they have understood themselves in the past, as they may be challenged to they may be expected to play along with the pronoun idea themselves. They may be asked to think about whether they could have been trans themselves and simply outgrew it. This is really an issue that can affect me. And so I feel like I have a right to bring it up. And this is a case where the medical truth, seems to be going against what's going on and has been going on, although it's not clear that it's really going on. The medicalization is going on in all the school systems the way the right wing claims it is. It's not clear that it's really happening very much here in Northern Virginia, for example. Not very much from what I'm hearing. But there's something else about this, about truth, medical, factual truth, the way you learn it from textbooks, from science, maybe even from mathematics, um, and the way you learn facts from history books, particularly about, in our case, slavery, and particularly about the caste system. I saw a movie yesterday, Origin, which talked about the caste system as opposed to being something that was a more pervasive concept than the human race, but that'll be for another blog post. But for a lot of people, their lived experience is more real to them than book things that they learn in books. And they don't really trust facts that authorities say are true, even science, as opposed to what they feel inside and from their own dealing with their own hardships and having to deal with other people in real life. And so that's a real kind of there's a real kind of disparity there. We kind of have this tremendous disparity in critical thinking skills, and the different levels of people's ability to have personal autonomy, um, in situations where they may want to have friends only who are sort of cognizant of things the same way they are. And they may not be as inclusive of people that are not as or much more about belonging to a group and not as, independent thinking for themselves. They may not want to include them, and that's sort of a problem. Um, the right to bring up one's own stakes a when dealing with and conversation with an issue like this can be sometimes compromised by um, the idea that the left has, particularly that the person is privileged. If he belongs to a privileged group, then he has no right to defend himself when confronted with the possibility of having to make a personal sacrifice. And this is sort of about power balances. And there's, there's also a lot of tension between speaking for yourself with your own resources and the possibility, of lowballing other people, like in occupations where you can work cheaper or something, or lowballing others politically when they expect you to show them allyship. That's a real issue. Policy changes can affect needed by the left for climate change, for example, or for what we call this overshoot problem now. they can, these policy changes can can um, affect your own independence and require you to give things up and that were important to you. They really can affect you. And of course, the right is resisting that. So a lot of the dependence on the right, particularly with the immigration issue, is because they feel they'll be expected to make sacrifices. And in fact, they're talking about asking people to house, at least in New York, they were talking about asking people to house immigrants in their own private homes, being paid for it, but actually take people in. And of course, we've had the issue of taking in refugees before and asylum seekers. We've talked about that before, and there's this whole idea that you can sponsor somebody overseas. I've talked about that before, the Welcome Corps. That's kind of getting off the subject, but that's something that people are being asked to think about. Um, I wanted to mention I went to a demonstration and filmed it. Of course, I didn't carry signs myself, and that's a problem for some people, but I filmed some videos at the Heritage Foundation near Union Station in Washington. And let me just bring up the picture. Didn't There's a sewing machine. That's a real skill. There it is. The Heritage Foundation. This was the picture at the demonstration on Saturday. And I've made some videos about Project 2025 that would go into effect the day a Republican president took office in 2025, whether it's Trump or not. That's been said to be a threat, and you'll be able to see other videos on this channel, which I made. Um, there, I didn't see any on the policy statements. I didn't see any discussion of gay rights specifically, apart from trans rights, which is taken over. And there's plenty of discussion of objection to the medicalization, the puberty blockers, the pronouns, and the fact that's being taught in the schools, and all the usual talking points that you're hearing about. They do say it is quite threatening to how some people perceive transgender rights. And of course, I don't know that it couldn't keep sifting down, and a new president could decide to bring back the ban on gays in the military, for example, which I spent so much, you know, my second career writing the books and everything, and even developing motion picture interest. I've spent a lot of effort on that. That could go down the tubes in the next administration, but it doesn't seem like they're really concerned about that. It seems like they are mostly concerned about the way gender identity is used, and it seems like a concept that's subjective and not objectively defined by science as biological sex is, but that it is simply a lived experience, and that's really kind of interesting. I just also wanted to mention one other thing that came up that recently some Republicans been talking about the lockdowns again in 2020 and the way it was handled, and that and I think the Heritage Foundation also said this, that you could have simply locked down the people that were more vulnerable, which would have included me, and taking away my freedom and independence. If I didn't have somebody to look after me, that could have stopped everything I was doing, but not stopped younger people. And it is true, COVID was some people it didn't affect at all. I only had the barest symptoms. I think I had it a couple times, but I only had the barest symptoms, including a slight loss of taste and smell in early 2021 that went away after I got the shots. The vaccine that went away. And I'm elderly and I was barely affected, but some people who were middle aged, died very quickly, and sometimes entire families died, and in other families, people would test positive, but no one would have symptoms. Seemed to be very dependent, not just on your age, but on your immune system and your genetics to an unusual extent. So this idea of just isolating the elderly, which they also suggested in Britain, I think, would not have worked out very well. I'm going to have some other important videos coming up soon, but that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I do thank you for listening.